Hello all. We will be discussing about cPanel databases today. My emphasis will be on how cPanel manages MySQL databases. So, what are databases? Databases are basically containers of data. For example, you can imagine a public library. We could say that a library is a database of books. And to manage these databases, we need a database management program. It is nothing but a software that is designed to handle lots of data and to store them in such a way that finding any snippet of data is efficient and quick, with random operations instead of sequential ones. And as you know, MySQL is the most commonly used database management software in Linux. It contains its own sets of users and databases. And each user is assigned to one or more databases with certain level of privileges, which we will look into in the further sections. And these users are different from the regular system users. And as you all know, etc my.cnf is the default MySQL configuration file. Here it is. This is how the database section will look in a cPanel interface. Users database information. Database information of cPanel users are stored in var cPanel databases. Let's check that. So cd var cPanel databases. We can see some default cPanel files there. We will go into the details later. cPanel maps database informations from the MySQL program to a file called users.db. So this is the file users.db. This is a cPanel generated file, so manually editing its contents is not at all recommended. A username.json file for each user is also present in this directory. It has information about the default database associated with an account. So this is the .json file we were talking about. A .json file is added to this directory whenever a hosting account is created via WHM. These files contains informations about the username, server IP, DB name, etc. of the hosting account. The .json file also contains informations about newly added databases, database users, etc. So let's see what happens in the backend when a cPanel database is added via a cPanel interface. So we go into the MySQL database section here in cPanel, and we will try and create a database. Let's call it training. We click create database and the database is added. So let's see what changes are made to the .json file when we add a database via the cPanel interface. We will cat the file, and you can see more strings are added to the .json file than the file I showed you before. You can see the database name I created in cPanel here and the server IP associated with it. Now let's try creating a database user and see what changes it makes to the .json file. Now let's try adding a user. We will type in edusages_user. We will type in some password. We will click the create user button and the user is created. Now let's see what changes creating the database user makes the .json file. We will cat the file again. You can see that the string is now extended and it has informations about the database user as well. You can see the database user mentioned here, edusages_user, the one we created right now. Now let's try adding the privileges, the needed privileges for the database user to access the database we created earlier. Now we will add the privileges to the user. We have selected the database and the user. We will click the add button and we will give all the privileges and we'll click make changes. And now the user has access to the database. Now let's see what happens to the .json file when we give the privilege to the database for the user. We will cat the file again. Now we can see the database user we created has access to the DB edusages underscore training, which is the DB we created earlier. So we can go into some more details about the var cPanel database directory. The privilege informations of each users on their respective database is stored in a file called grants underscore username.yaml. It is a file in the YAML format and we can check it now. This is the file in our case. We can check the contents of the file. We will cat it, cat grants edusages.yaml, and here it is. You can see that this section corresponds to the default account which is added while we create a hosting account, and this section defines the privilege information of the user and the database we created. Now there is another directory called var cPanel data store / username, whichever the username may be, and it has two files, MySQL DB usage and MySQL disk usage. It gives us information about how many databases are used by a user and the size occupied by the databases. So we will go into the directory data store. You can see some files, and these are the files I was talking about, MySQL DB usage and MySQL disk usage. The actual data and contents of a database are stored in a directory called var lib MySQL. This directory also contains the default MySQL error log. Now we will go into the directory var lib MySQL. You can actually see some cPanel default database informations here. The IB data and IB log file, which corresponds that we have some InnoDB tables inside the databases, and here is the error log I was talking about, training.edusages.com.err. This is the default error log format, and it has the logging informations of MySQL errors. We can actually go into the database we created. I have actually restored an old WordPress SQL file so that we can see how it looks like. Here you go. These are actually some InnoDB tables. You can make that out from the IB data files. As a precaution, we don't manually edit files under var lib MySQL for security reasons. We'll go to the next section, remote MySQL. Allowing remote MySQL connections is often done to enable a program on your local computer to access a database on the server. The access is given to the server by allowing the public IP of the database program in the firewall of the server to have access to the MySQL port, which is by default is 3306. The IP information, the IP which we allowed in the firewall, is added to the file. We have already mentioned it. It is the grants underscore username.yml file. We can see that now. We can click the remote MySQL icon here, and we can add, say, an example IP. I'll add like 123.123.123.123, and we will add the host. Now the public IP of the database program is added to the server to have access to the MySQL port and the database. We can see the IP in the YAML file right now. We will go into the var cPanel directory, and we will check the YAML file for the IP we have added right now. We will cat grants.yaml, and here you go. You can see the IP, the example IP I added earlier, like 123.123.123.123, and the IP has access to all the databases associated with the account. Now we will go into the last section in cPanel databases, and that is PHP MyAdmin. Actually, controlling and administrating databases via the backend or a terminal is a hideous task. You have to be really thorough with the MySQL command to administrate these databases. So to make this easier, a computer program, a free software was introduced, and it is called as PHP MyAdmin. Frequently used operations like importing database, exporting database, running MySQL queries, searching and replacing strings, etc. can be done easily via this URL based web application which can be accessed through a browser. We can actually take a look at PHP MyAdmin right now. We can click the PHP MyAdmin icon right now, and this will redirect us to the PHP MyAdmin interface. Actually, we can do a lot of things in PHP MyAdmin. I'm not going to go deeper into that. I'll explain some basic things we can do, like importing a database, exporting it, running some MySQL queries, searching, etc. So this is the username of our account, and we have two databases here, the one which I created earlier and one which I had before that. And if we click this, we can actually see the tables in that database. This is actually an example WordPress template, and you can actually export this database in SQL format or compressed format and different formats using the export tab here. You can actually import tables or databases in .SQL format and also in a compressed format using the import option. MySQL queries can be executed via the SQL interface here. We can write the query here and click the go button, and the query will be executed. Any errors, it will be shown here as well. Then there is an option to search for string. You can search for exact phrases, regular expressions in what tables you want, or you can also select all the tables. So I hope you understood, and that's it for today. Thank you.